warm welcome. You're watching World 360. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. The US President Joe Biden is under the radar while China has finally quoted a figure on its COVID deaths. We'll bring you all the details in just a bit, but first up are the headlines. Intensifying Republican attacks, the discovery of more classified records raise questions over US President Joe Biden's handling of classified documents. China reports nearly 60,000 COVID-related deaths since December 8th last year. This after the WHO and satellite images revealed China's underreporting of COVID deaths. Moscow claims control of Soledar, but Kyiv denies. This as Russia confirms that Belarus could join the war if Ukraine invades Russia or Belarus. And Prince Harry's hotly touted memoir Spare becomes the fastest-selling non-fiction book. But will the Spare to the Heir lose his royal title after this book? Find out. Let's begin with our top focus on the United States. A major political crisis is staring at US President Joe Biden. President Biden has faced much embarrassment for his improper handling of classified documents, especially since he is someone who called the former president, Donald Trump, irresponsible for hoarding sensitive documents at his Florida estate. Biden's scandal came to light as 2 batches of highly sensitive information were discovered first at Biden's old vice presidential office and then at 2 locations at his Wilmington property that also included Biden's garage. In fact, the intelligence material discovered at first carry information linked to countries like Iran, the UK and even Ukraine. Interestingly, the US president, when asked about his mishandling of classified documents, revealed his surprise. Listen in to what Joe Biden had to say.
I was briefed about this discovery and surprised to learn that there were any government records that were taken there to that office. But I don't know what's in the documents. My lawyers have not suggested I ask what documents they were. I've turned over the boxes. They've turned over the boxes to the archives, and we're cooperating fully with the review, and which I hope will be finished soon, and there'll be more detail at that time.
But the US president is now facing criticism from the Republicans. This after the Justice Department launched an investigation last year into Republican former President Donald Trump's handling of his classified documents. They were discovered at Trump's Mar-a-Lago club in Palm Beach in Florida. Now, Republicans, including Trump, have accused Biden administration for deliberately sitting over classified information. So much so, fingers have been raised at the apparent deliberate silence maintained by the Justice Department as well, simply because the documents had been discovered shortly before the US midterm election. Now, analysts say that the discovery of these classified documents could have backfired for Biden and the Democrats during the midterms. Meanwhile, the White House has nothing concrete to offer in its defense.
We are confident that a thorough review will show that these documents were inadvertently misplaced and the president and his lawyers acted promptly upon discovering of this mistake.
Now, the scandal has marred efforts to hold Republicans accountable. Possibly, it could also re-energize Donald Trump's 2024 White House bid. On that note, let's try and get in a sense of perspective from both ends of the spectrum, what the Democrats and what the Republican strategists have to say. Let's listen in. I'm in fact joined in by my guests, Crystal Knight, who's a Democratic strategist, and Orlando Sanchez, who's a Republican strategist. Many thanks to you both for joining in on World 360. Now, Crystal, as someone who called Donald Trump irresponsible, is the incident not highlighting President Joe Biden's hypocrisy and double standards, as former Vice President Mike Pence has also called it?
I don't think it's hypocrisy on Joe Biden's part because, again, he's turned over the documents. What we saw with the Trump team, one, Donald Trump lied about holding classified documents in Mar-a-Lago. 2, Donald Trump's legal team also lied about holding classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. 3, Donald Trump's legal team said that they turned over everything, and they did not. And so these are just lies stacked upon lies of not only the former president, but also his legal team trying to withhold classified documents, and they did not properly store them as they should have per presidential or per the National Archives records. And so these two things are not the same. And so it's hard to compare both situations because both people acted very differently, and the way that they've handled this information has been completely different.
All right, let me bring in Orlando on that note. Orlando, how do you assess the Democratic defense that we are seeing these days, that President Biden was quick in turning over the documents, so he can't be compared with Donald Trump, something that has also been said by Crystal just now?
Well, of course. And as you know, Mr. Biden appointed Merrick Garland as the Attorney General of the United States, who's in charge of the investigation. And so they sat on the information that Mr. Biden had sensitive documents, classified documents, for 2 months. So I would say that the idea that they are cooperating and turned the information over quickly is preposterous.
Okay, Crystal, White House and the Justice Department failed for more than 2 months to publicly disclose the discovery earlier of these classified records, something that has also been mentioned by Orlando. Do you agree that the timing of this discovery was extremely fragile and the midterms could have had a role to play?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the timing was definitely fragile, and, the Justice Department releasing this information, 2 months after the midterm elections, it is questionable. Could it have impacted the outcome? Possibly. I mean, what we know right now is that many states across this country has early voting periods. So many voters would have already cast their ballots by the time this information would have been released. So it is a calculated decision on behalf of the Department of Justice to decide when it's important to release information and when to withhold information. And so that is a questionable thing.
Right.
But now that we're beyond the midterm elections, it's a moot point.
It is a moot point. Orlando, Donald Trump's camp has intensified the attack, including his own son, Trump Jr., who's questioning the possibility of Hunter Biden gaining access to those classified information, considering his alleged links with China and Ukraine. Should this possibility be a point of concern?
Well, that's exactly correct. I mean, for many years, we've known that Hunter Biden has had relationships with the Chinese. And the question is, did Hunter Biden have access to classified documents in the Penn office that Mr. Biden kept and also in Mr. Biden's garage? We don't know. And so it's going to require an investigation. But as you know, the Attorney General, who is appointed by the president, is in charge of the investigation.
Yes. Many thanks to you, Crystal and Orlando, for joining in on my show. And with that, we shift our attention over to China. After World Health Organization placed the spotlight on China for underreporting COVID-related deaths, Beijing has now come up with the official death toll of the latest outbreak. Previously, China had reported just 37 COVID-related deaths, but now they have updated their death toll to over 60,000 deaths, and that too only since December 8th of last year. This after the global organization asked China for more rapid, regular and reliable data on COVID hospitalizations and deaths. Now, beyond this, the World Health Organization held a high-level meeting with counterparts in China to discuss the surge. Now, remember, multiple visuals over the last few weeks have surfaced, and they show overwhelmed hospitals and crammed crematoriums.
WHO still believes that deaths are heavily underreported from China, and this is in relation to the definitions that are used, but also to the need for doctors and those reporting in the public health system to be encouraged to report these cases and not discouraged. However, having said that, we do, as Maria said, want and are working ever closer with our colleagues in China to try and understand better the transmission dynamics. But we still do not have adequate information to make a full comprehensive risk assessment, and therefore we will continue to try to encourage access to that data.
And with that, let's now bring you the latest from the front as far as Ukraine is concerned. It's been over 320 days since Russia invaded Ukraine. As the war closes in on the grim one-year mark, the battle for the Ukrainian town of Soledar is underway. And there's been a significant development as Russia has claimed that its forces have captured the eastern town. But Ukraine has denied this claim, with troops saying that they are still stationed at the edges of Soledar. If Russia's claims become valid and Soledar does indeed fall, it would mean a strategic victory for the Russians after months of setbacks. Meanwhile, Russia's most senior general in Russia, Valery Gerasimov, has become the leader of the Russian army and is now spearheading Russia's efforts in the war. Let's quickly try and get in a sense of perspective in terms of where this war is headed, because remember, it will be in February that the war will be completing a year. And for that, I'm joined in by political analyst and journalist Peter Zalmaev, who's joining me live from Ukraine. Thank you, Peter, for joining in. Is Russia's military shake-up and the appointment of yet another new war commander general a result of Russia's battleground losses? Not to forget the conflicting claims being made by Russia over Soledar.
It seems to me that he's being readied for a final battle that we're expecting sometime late winter, maybe early spring. Ukrainian military officials have said that Russia will try to attack Kiev a second time. I'm not sure if that's necessarily going to be the case, but some have compared this appointment of Gerasimov as being appointed to an electrical chair, which with a low voltage where you would be just fried very slowly. It's not something to be envied. And yes, I do agree that once again it shows that the Russian army is in disarray, among other things, because it does not have very clear goals in this war, neither on the political level nor on the military level. It seems that Russia now has declared war for war's sake.
Okay. Peter, what could the Belarusian involvement in the war mean for Moscow and Putin? Could it destabilize the regime in Minsk?
What Putin has been after this whole time is, first of all, using Belarus territory as a staging ground to launch his attacks on Ukraine. And this is what happened in the first days of the war. He has basically sucked Belarus dry of all its major military equipment, arms, etc. And finally, Putin has wanted from Lukashenko his official entry into the war, so as not to appear alone in this fight. He wants this political sort of legitimacy. Lukashenko knows that his army has never been tried in battle. It's never fought in an active war. And so he's been really showing a true, an incredible skill in trying to wiggle out of this. Simply because he knows that it's very risky and it may lead to the Belarusian army, if he were to send them into battle officially against Ukraine, they could just turn around and march on Minsk. Belarusians do not want to fight against Ukrainians, who are very, very close people, who are fraternal people. And so Putin is desperate to give this war sort of an imprimatur of an international coalition. My bet is on Lukashenko continuing to play his game and finally refusing to enter this war officially. Having said that, Belarus is still a party to this war. Lukashenko has, like I said, provided his territory to the Russian troops. And so just like Putin, Lukashenko is a war criminal.
All right. Many thanks to you, Peter, for joining in. Always a pleasure to speak to you. And with that, let's now shift our attention to a crucial bilateral that took place between Japan and the United States. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and the United States President Joe Biden held a bilateral at the White House earlier this week. This meeting comes as Japan looks to build security cooperation with allies in a time of provocative Chinese and North Korean military action. It was a positive boost to ties between the two nations. Biden administration officials praised Japan for stepping up in the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Remember, this bilateral took place on Saturday. And Kishida, while speaking through an interpreter, said the two nations share fundamental values such as democracy and the rule of law, and stressed that their joint role on the global stage is becoming even greater. And with that, let's now shift our focus over to the United Kingdom. Prince Harry's memoir titled Spare has been causing chaos across the UK and even around the globe, with reactions pouring in from the public to either condemn or even laud Harry's confessions. In fact, Harry's tell-all royal gossip has become the fastest-selling non-fiction book of all time. Among the bigger revelations, the physical fight between the princes has gained maximum attention. Then there's the drama between Meghan and Kate over lip gloss and bridesmaid dresses. There's also an interesting revelation on Harry's consumption of mushrooms at Courtney Cox's residence during a party. Now, what will this memoir mean for Prince Harry and the royals at Buckingham Palace? Let's get in a sense of perspective from royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams, who's joining me live from London right now. Richard, thank you for joining in. Now, despite the harsh reviews, Prince Harry's memoir has become UK's fastest-selling non-fiction book, even more so after Netflix viewers hit out at Harry and Meghan for their explosive docu-series. Does that indicate that Spare will actually earn Harry more fanfare?
I think that there's absolutely no question that the Sussexes have controlled the narrative, although they've been ruthless in doing so. No doubt, Spare has sold extremely well, as you say, and with the docuseries last month, with the trailers as well, and also with a series of interviews that Harry has been promoting the book, especially in the United States, in their view, colluding with the media against them, to the whole world, because all this has been picked up online by social media and in papers and in all sources and discussed on television. So it's been a vast worldwide effort, right, and no doubt they will be pleased with it. But it's also been very destructive.
All right, Richard, during his promotional interviews, Prince Harry said that he would like nothing more than for his children to have relationships with the royal family. Do you still view that as a possibility post the memoir?
Well, Archie and Lily, in theory, should be HRHs. They should have the title His and Her Royal Highness under the 1917 protocols laid down by George V. However, there's no doubt that King Charles wants to slim down the royal family, and there's also no doubt that there is a huge rift that I think is unbridgeable between the royal family and the Sussexes. Under those circumstances, it's very hard to see that their children, who are still so young, that Archie and Lily will have much to do in the coming months anyway with their cousins. It's impossible to look into a crystal ball years ahead, but the rift between the royal family and the Sussexes is very wide. The attacks made on King Charles, on Queen Consort Camilla, and most particularly, right, of course, the sibling rivalry that comes out of this book that is so shocking. This will have made any sort of reconciliation impossible whilst anything like this is continuing. From that point of view, it's hard to see how Archie and Lily will see very much of their royal cousins looking ahead.
Well, Richard, I'm sure it's been a strange week for royal commentators, but whether King Charles, Queen Consort Camilla, or even Prince of Wales William or Princess of Wales Catherine, which royal, according to you, has emerged best from this entire royal fallout?
Well, absolutely no royal has emerged well from what I can only call a memoir. I've read it now, and we had extracts that were leaked a week ago. I mean, the facts simply are that, as Anderson Cooper in 60 Minutes described it to Harry in one of his interviews, he portrays the royal family like Game of Thrones without the dragons. They're all plotting against him, and the sibling rivalry, which we were unaware of this, has been going on for many, many years, and the relations between him and William and the way he describes that in the book. I mean, it's deeply tragic. He's someone haunted by the loss of his mother and in therapy and needing it. But no one comes out well, and Harry doesn't come out well either, because if it wasn't for their royal connections, they wouldn't get the contracts on Netflix, Spotify, and Random House with this book. And as far as privacy is concerned, they say they want it, while they take no notice of anyone else's.
All right, I'm sure viewer knows it best. Many thanks to you, Richard, for sharing your precious inputs on World 360. And with that, it's time to slip into a quick break, but don't go anywhere because more global updates await your attention on World 360.